Hey guys, in this video for AP Biology or College Biology, we're going to be focusing in on Unit 3 Cellular Energetics. We're going to be focusing a little bit more on energy with Section 3.4, which is focused on cellular energy. Just as a little disclaimer, please note what's listed below and let's get started. So, when we're talking about this major topic of cellular energy, we like to think about the common, I say common, topic of metabolism. Now, in the media and social media, you think of metabolism as being able to break down food items, and that's not entirely true. It's part of it, but not the whole thing. The thing is, metabolism is all chemical processes that take place in an organism. And so that's just a fancy way of saying all the different things that energy uses up or releases in said individualistic items, such as a human being or any other living item. So that's what that basically means in layman's terms. So, when we think about all those processes, I want you to think about this picture over here with the wheel, because remember, let's take a look at us as an organisms. I'm assuming if you are watching this video, you are a human being. So just be aware of that. So let's say that you yourself are walking around. You are this green stick figure, and you've got your running shoes. And let's say that you are running and you're running a marathon and you're going in said direction. So the thing is, you are going to give off energy. So we're going to have a giant E here that you are going to have to give off. And the only way that you can give off energy is if you consume energy, like food. So maybe in the morning you had some wonderful eggs that you ate, and that helps you run in the morning to run that marathon. And then after you're done, you get rid of that food as you so see fit, and then you have to do the same process over and over again. And that's because your body has to consume energy and release energy over and over and over again. And that's because we basically have metabolism. It's the composition of all that energy together. So, when we're talking about energy in terms of the bigger picture in science, we talk about the difference between catabolism and anabolism, or catabolic pathways versus anabolic pathways. So, what is the difference between the two? So, with catabolic pathways, you're basically releasing energy. And with anabolic pathways, you're building energy that you are consuming. And what I mean by that is you basically consume energy to then build better items, better molecules. So let's recap. So we have catabolic pathways, there I go. And I want you to think of you breathing. So if you see here in this picture, we have that mitochondria. And the mitochondria, if you remember in Unit 2, is the powerhouse of the cell, right? And if you remember, we talked about ATP. Just as a disclaimer, we're going to be talking about a lot of ATP in Unit 3 moving forward. And I want you to think of ATP as energy. When you see ATP, think of energy. The thing is, when we breathe, we go ahead and consume food. And when we consume food, our body needs to break down that food. And when we do that, we go ahead and we consume that food and we're able to utilize that ATP. However, when we have anabolic pathways, what happens, you want to think of plants and the process of photosynthesis. You want to think of a chloroplast and the process of photosynthesis. Remember, chloroplasts were an organelle that was in the plant cell. So with chloroplasts, what ends up happening is you have the sun, and the sun is being harnessed by plants to therefore take the energy and build complex molecules like ATP. And it's a symbiotic relationship between us and plants, us as human beings. And so I want you to think of we're tree huggers, essentially. We should love trees. Why? Because they're plants. And plants provide us energy or sustainability because they provide us food, because we consume, well, we don't consume trees, but we consume plants essentially, or we consume other animals that do consume plants, and therefore we depend on those plants to then provide us energy that we then can break down and harness. So that's the relationship between plants and us. So we have a we should have a tree hugging relationship essentially because we depend on trees and they also provide us oxygen, which you'll learn later on. But on a bigger picture, we need them to help us not only to breathe, but to be able to consume our food products because we can't just sit outside in the sun and take in that energy directly. Okay, so now we're going into energy. And when we're talking about energy in general, we're talking about the ability to do work or rearrange matter. For the purposes of AP biology, there are different types of energy. There's ATP, which is the big one. We have NADH. Sometimes you might see FADH as well later on in the unit, but just note that ATP is the biggest form of energy, and that's the one that we utilize. Now, energy can be broken down into three main ways. We have kinetic energy, potential energy, and activation energy. Kinetic energy is the energy of motion. Potential energy is stored energy. And activation energy is the required energy that is needed to convert from potential to kinetic energy. And this is a mouthful, and I like to think of it as a diver. So I have a picture here. I'm going to draw a person. Whoops. I'm going to clear that out actually because my diving board doesn't look great. So we have a diving board here, and we have said person that is getting ready to dive, and eventually they get off the diving board and they go ahead and they go in the water, right? So we have this diving board. The thing is, when the person is getting ready to dive, they have energy that's stored. That is the potential energy. The potential energy is that stored energy. They are getting ready to dive off that diving board. And then what ends up happening, you could also think of this apparatus you might see in which we have these balls, and if you ping on one ball, it transfers its energy onto the other balls, and then it goes like ping, 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 back and forth. Well, when it's not working, meaning it's just not moving at all, it has potential or stored energy. It works the same way as the diver getting ready to dive off that board, but it needs somebody to give it a push to go ahead and turn it into kinetic energy. And that's activation energy. Activation energy is like the divers getting ready just at that moment to utilize their whole body to convert that potential energy that was once stored into the energy of motion, which is kinetic energy. Sort of like this hand getting ready to transfer that energy over so that these balls can go ping, ping, ping back and forth. Same idea, that is activation energy. Then it converts to kinetic energy, which is literally the diver going off the board. It is the energy of motion. They might do some really cool tricks. Those are all kinetic energies. And that's like the little apparatus going back and forth and going ping, 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 the actual motion of that. So that's how we like to think of the different types of energy, essentially. Now we could talk a little bit more about energy in terms of laws. There are two major laws that you're expected to know, and that's the first law and the second law of thermodynamics. So in the first law of thermodynamics, we say that energy can be transferred, but neither created nor destroyed. Remember, you for yourself, you need to consume energy by eating foods, but you let that go. You might, let it go through sweat. You might let it go through urine. These are all different ways of letting go of the energy. But that energy is expunged from you, but can go into a different system. Maybe you might think of you sitting on a chair and you exude heat, which is a type of energy, and you sit for a very long time because you're studying. And then you get off that chair, and if you notice the chair is really hot, that's because the energy from you transferred onto that chair. So energy can be transferred, but it doesn't get created, nor does it get destroyed. You could think the same thing about that heat or cold, switching it on and off. That is the energy that's being transferred. It's neither created nor destroyed. Now, the second law of thermodynamics basically says every energy transfer increases the universe entropy, and people are like, what is entropy? I want you to think of mass chaos. The fact is, when we're transferring energy, we increase the chaos regardless. And that's what entropy means. Entropy means chaos. We are increasing the chaos every time that we transfer over that energy. When you are sitting on that chair and you get off that chair is a little bit more chaotic than it was before. So those are the two major laws of thermodynamics. Now, you want to think of the term free energy. So the thing is, you might have heard me previously say that you on the chair or you walking up a hill in either this video or a previous video is a system. So I want you to think of yourself sitting on that chair as a system where you are a system too, and you have energy that's inside of you, and then you transfer that over to the chair, which is another system. So it has its own set parts of energy that can do work, like you sitting down, you standing up. And we use this equation called Gibbs free energy. This may or may not come up in the test, but you might need to utilize the formula if they do. That just be aware that this might come up. So when we're talking about Gibbs free energy, you want to think of delta G or G as the free energy of a system, which is usually in the terms of joules or kilojoules. H is your total energy of the system that you want to think of enthalpy. You want to think of heat. So if they ever think of heat, you want to think that's where that H came from. T is your temperature, usually in the form of Kelvin. This is a constant number. It's not a constant number, it's a constant unit, I should say, that they utilize. And then S, which is the chaos of that system or that entropy that we talked about before. So that would be what we consider free energy. Now, free energy can be considered exergonic or endergonic. And this is a little bit more important for AP biology because you want to think of exergonic and endergonic as potential questions that you could see on a free response question. And when they think of exergonic, I want you to think of exit. So basically, it's the release of free energy, like you breathing. You consume food, right? And then you release that when you breathe out. And then endergonic is the opposite. So a plant, for example, will sit in the sun or be in the sun, and it will absorb that energy. So when we compare both utilizing these graphs, you want to remember the difference between the two. This is very important. So for exergonic reactions, you have the reactants and the products, and you also have the same thing, reactants and products for endergonic equations as well. This little hump right here for both of these equations represent the idea of activation energy. So when we're talking about reactants and when we're talking about products, where they're located is what makes the graphs different. So when you think of exergonic reactions, remember the energy is being released. So the energy is getting lower than when it started. So you could see from high to low. So got lower from the reactants to the products. Endergonic, En, enter, means that the energy has increased. The free energy has increased. So from reactants to products, we went from low to high versus from exergonic, we went from high to low in that system because the energy has been released. So you can see where the arrows are. The arrows mean that they left out or they came in. Okay, so now let's talk about ATP in general, which is our normal current energy source that we like to utilize for AP biology or college biology. And I wanted to put these two pictures up so you could see some key differences in the structure. Please note, I do understand that this is not a chemistry class, but this is really helpful in understanding diagrams that you'll see later on. So adenosine triphosphate is, you could see here, the tri versus adenosine diphosphate, which is di. The thing is, with adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, you have three main items: an adenosine, a ribose, which is a sugar, and three phosphates. Please note the three phosphates here. 1, 2, 3. What happens is when you have ATP, you're either talking about ATP breaking down or formulating. So I want to point that out as well. So if we use the word hydrolysate or hydrolysis, we're talking about the action of taking ATP and breaking it down to ADP because a phosphate has come off. Because you see here, there's three phosphates in ATP, and in ADP, or adenosine di, meaning two, and tri, meaning three, we have released a phosphate to then only have two phosphates, therefore calling this ADP. Now, we could call ATP synthesis, meaning creation of ATP, the opposite way of when phosphate comes in with adenosine diphosphate, and that becomes adenosine triphosphate. So I just wanted to point out the difference between hydrolysis versus synthesis, so you are aware of the difference between the two if you do get a question and they utilize those terms. So just be aware of that. And just note it's not a chemistry exam, but it's just helpful to know the difference between the two. Okay, let's talk about enzymes in general. I know we've been talking about this a lot, but there's some key pieces of information that we need to add in addition to what we've learned already. So we talked about factors beforehand like pH, temperature, and salt concentration, which are external factors that can influence enzymes. However, there are things that can help out enzymes as well, and they're called cofactors and coenzymes. So an example of a cofactor is an inorganic helper like ions or certain specific elements, I should say. And we have organic helpers, which are vitamins essentially, that are called coenzymes. So we can have cofactors or coenzymes. Just know that the cofactors are usually elements and coenzymes are usually things like vitamins, and they're organic. The reason why this is important that we're talking about enzymes again for a brief second is in relation to energy. Remember, we talked about that activation energy, and we previously talked about enzymes and the act that you could think of a battery pack on someone going up or down a hill to assist. Well, remember, that has potential and kinetic energy, the person running. And so utilizing an enzyme can alter the way the activation works for that system, you running up and down a hill. So there are other things that we talked about before, enzyme inhibitors, which can also alter the energy of a system, such as competitive inhibitors that we said before compete for an active site, or non-competitive inhibitors, which can bind somewhere else on the enzyme. If you need more clarity about enzymes, there is another video in Unit 3 that is section 3.3 and 3.2, so 2.2, 3.2 and 3.3, which covers enzymes a little bit more if you feel that you need those videos to help you out. So I would suggest those as well. And we also talk about allosteric regulation and feedback inhibition, which we'll cover later on. Just for now, note that regulatory molecules basically are the gatekeepers that allow for enzymes to either make the enzyme work properly or not work properly. And then we can have feedback inhibition, which we'll talk about later, which are pathways in which enzymes work that can end the final product. So what we mean is, let's say that we have an enzyme that attaches to an active site with a substrate and it's ready to go, and it releases something that tells another enzyme to attach to another substrate to release and say go, go, go. So that pattern is called feedback loops, and that could be inhibiting a process. If this does not go, then this process also can't go, therefore can't produce a final product. So that's how feedback inhibitions occur, by regulatory molecules that either can bind to an enzyme to either have the enzyme work properly and continue that chain, or it could stop the enzyme and therefore render it not feasible to continue on. So I just want to point that out there as another way enzymes work. Okay, now it's quiz time. Let's take a look at this quiz question together. I'll take a moment and ask that you pause this video, read this question, and then unpause the video once completed. Okay, now that you're done reading that question, let's try to see if we can answer this question. So, did you get the answer B? If so, you're correct. But let's review this question. So it says during intense exercise, we're talking about muscle cells, they rapidly convert from ADP to ATP to meet the energy demands. So you're producing that energy essentially. So what happens is the question is asking which of the best explains the process and its relation to cellular metabolism. Now, just as a preface, you haven't really learned about cellular metabolism just yet. For now, you just know that you're doing some sort of exercise, you have muscle cells, and you're converting from ADP to ATP, which means that you have that addition of phosphate because you went from di to tri, right? So what's happening also is we know that we're converting from ADP to ATP, and we know that means that we're also covering a cellular metabolism. And we know that we're not breaking down energy, we're forming energy. So because of this, we can delete any answer that says that we're releasing energy. So here we're saying that we're releasing energy, so that's incorrect. And then here it says something about it being exergonic for answer choice C. The problem with this is we're saying that we're releasing energy and we're letting it go. But in this case, we're looking to have ATP in our system. So that's not the case for this one. And then for answer choice D, ATP synthesis only occurs in the mitochondria. Be careful with extreme answers like only. Only is not favored for science-based questions. And it says it only occurs in the mitochondria, and it only is sourced by oxygen. While this is a process you will learn about later on, it isn't the only way they could produce ATP. So we don't like this answer, leaving us with answer choice B, which basically says ATP synthesis, which we talked about as the creation of ATP from ADP. And we know that that's because of a phosphate that was going ahead and being added. I don't care about the other additional information right now because we're going to learn about that later on. You might be thinking, why did I give you this question for section 3.4? It's because you're going to get questions that you don't know all the topics to, right? Biology in general can be broken down into cell biology, human biology, and you can see questions like this for AP biology that you're not going to have all the information for. You're just going to have to use the information information that you know to have and sort of analyze each of the answer choices to break down which one is the best possible answer. So I hope this helps with you to get a brief preview about metabolism in general. I hope that you do like the entire video and make sure to subscribe. And as always, we hope to see you back soon. Hey, Geeking Out on STEM family, guess what? We want you to hit that subscribe button. Why? Because we'll be producing more content just like this for the AP Biology exam and the new digital SAT exam. By subscribing, you'll be getting exclusive, up-to-date tips, tricks, and secrets for both exams. Also, if you're a parent, a teacher, a homeschool instructor, or a student, you might be looking for affordable and exclusive digital products to help improve multiple choice questions, free response questions, or question bank questions related to both the digital SAT or AP Biology exam. We have them here. Make sure to check out our link tree in our bio for curated resources that you won't find anywhere else. These unique resources are designed to help you raise your score. By hitting the subscribe button, the more subscribers we get, by the way, the more videos we can make. So make sure to join our family to ensure that you get a perfect score for both exams. We can't wait to help you succeed.